we are heading into our year of citizens of the future. That's us, citizens of the future. And we were able to look forward into the year. I want to thank all of you who were able to participate in that last week, getting a broad overview of all of our topics. And today we're really diving into our first specific one, silence and serenity. When I asked Cliff who he thought I should ask to present a topic on this, without any hesitation, he said, you know that Tai Chi teacher who was there at the very beginning of Still and Moving Center? What was his name? Oh, Jerry Punzal. Yes, he just seems to live in a pool of serenity. I said, you're right. So I gave Jerry a call, and it was so wonderful to reconnect. I was able to have really not only the pleasure, the satisfaction, but just really the deep kind of grounding of studying Tai Chi for the very first time with Jerry. And I did so probably for about the first 5 years of Still and Moving Center. I owe him a huge debt of gratitude. I want to say that one of the ways that it affected me on the outside is that I tend to be a very Tigger type of energy person, and it made it very difficult for me to have my students follow me in my NIA classes because I was just so darn bouncy. Not everybody is a digger. And so suddenly, not even suddenly, gradually, as I studied Tai Chi with Jerry, I found myself able to, I think, lower my center of gravity and to maintain that when I chose to do so. And I think there's something analogically speaking that we're talking about when we talk about ourselves training to become more silent and more serene. So I hold Jerry up as a huge exemplar of this practice. Jerry's going to be able to tell you a little bit more about someone that he studied with, who to him exemplifies silence and serenity. Her name is Nana Veary, and she is really one of the revered Hawaiian kupuna. So we're really doubly blessed today to hear from a wonderful exemplar of silence and serenity about another exemplar and teacher of silence and serenity. So Jerry, it's all yours now.
Thanks, Renee. When Renee first asked me to start today's conversation on silence and serenity, I decided that I should talk about Nana Veary. Now, I wasn't a formal student of Nana, but I can share with you today some of my experiences with her. That's what I like to do. So to begin, just some background on her. She was born in 1908 on the island of Oahu. And the time is significant because at that time, the roots to the ancient ways were still strong, still connected. And so Nana learned from her mother and her grandparents the old traditional ways. She spoke a different Hawaiian. She said that the Hawaiian today is very different from how she learned it when she was young. They had a different way of looking at the power of word. They worked communally together, and in a lot of times it was very silent work. So she learned the secret of understanding the language of rocks and trees and all of nature. She learned that the secret was silence. Now, I believe what this means is if you can harness silence and you can become very still and silent, you can enter a meditative state. And the more silent you can be, the more still you can be, the deeper the meditation. And then the practice is to sustain that level, be that deep. And in time, you can start to perceive things that we normally don't see here or are in touch with. So at a very young age, she was developing that skill, and the power of silence was what she was developing. Her practices. Nana was a seeker. She did everything. She was a healer. She was a teacher, a seer. She was constantly searching for spiritual wisdom, and she trained with kahunas. She meditated with gurus. She attended seances. She traveled the world to visit spiritual places. She interacted with shamans and mystics. She was a Christian for a long time, studying that doctrine, following that doctrine. She studied and practiced metaphysics. And eventually she started long hours of Zen meditation, sitting meditation. She did some classes. She was teaching metaphysics classes for a while, but she came to the conclusion that a better way to have people get in touch with their inner spirituality was to go take them out in nature and in silence walk around in nature. So that's when she started her group silent retreats. And I believe she did this for about 10 years or so. At the end of her spiritual journey, her path leads her to Chozenji Dojo up in Kalihi Valley. And she's in her 80s by this time. When she came to Chozenji, she said, I have found my way home. That was her comment getting there. She also stated that her silent retreats and the silent method of sitting at the dojo accomplished the same thing. It got people to go inward and see their spiritual selves, and this would put them in a state of bliss or serenity that many different arts call samadhi. At this dojo, the Zen master was a local boy. His name was Stanley Tanoi, but I will refer to him as Tanoi Roshi from now on. And he was an exceptional martial artist. He had attained very high levels in 7 different martial arts. And most of us, we study one martial art our whole lives and never get to the level of mastery that he did in 7. And he accomplished all of this before he was 32 years old. So the type of Zen that he practiced there was very rigorous, very martial based. So when Nana came there to study, it was a very interesting interplay of different masters at work. I'm sitting in the dojo one day, in the kitchen, on the floor, getting a lecture from Tanoi Roshi. And I turned to see this elderly lady, white-haired, with this big smile on her face, walk in. Tanoi Roshi has stood up by this time, and he goes to greet her. And they had this silent greeting going on for a minute or two. And I remember the feeling that there was something expanding in the room, just filling up all the spaces in the room. And that was my first meeting with Nana Veary. Now, individually, both these people had very great ki, or vital energy. And most people could see it or feel it from them when they were, just by themselves. But when they were together, communicating with each other, they did it at entirely different frequency. Their combined vibrational energy at times would seem to alter the matter around them. And there are many witnesses to this at different times when Nana and Tanoi Roshi would be together, communicating with each other. So they shared a very special and unique bond, those people. I also observed that they use their swords differently though. Tanoi, being the martial artist, he would draw his sword out really quickly and just cut away all my delusions and small-mindedness. And the only thing I would see was the last few inches of his sword going back into the scabbard. It was so quick. And then in a little while, my ego would just come apart and fall on the floor. Just like those old samurai movies. You see where the guy would draw his sword and you wait for a second or two and then the candle or whatever he had cut falls apart. It was just the same kind of feeling with Tanoi. But he did it compassionately because he always kept his sword very, very sharp and his cuts were very, very precise. So he wasn't chopping at me with this dull piece of metal and causing me all this anguish and unneeded pain and suffering. It was always a very, very clean cut. That's how Tanoi manifested his ki. Nana, on the other hand, would look at me with this big smile. She would hug me, and I would just feel enveloped by something that just permeated through my entire body. And all my defenses would just melt away. And she did this without even drawing her sword. I would be completely disarmed. So that's what I observed about how they manifested their great power and understanding. So different method, but accomplished the same thing. They just cut through all of my bullshit. So they were both true masters. So one day, Tanoi Roshi tells me to accompany Nana on a silent retreat that she's going to hold on the island of Kauai in Kokee. So another dojo member and I, his name was Mike Sayama, we fly over, we gather all the participants at the airport, put them in the van, and all of them were out-of-state people. Nobody was from Hawaii. I think there are a few from maybe different countries, about 12 in all. So we put them in vans and we start heading up to Kokee. There was a lot of nervous, excited chatter as we were heading up and tons of questions. But what I started to sense was that some of these people were thinking that they were going on this holiday or vacation, and that they were going to be guided, there would be guided tours taking them around and showing them things. And so I remember thinking at that point, wow, some of you guys are really in for a surprise. So we get up to Kokee, everybody checks in. We handle all of the housekeeping stuff and going through the and program, the scheduling. And Nana bows her head and stays silent for a while. Then she announces, the time of silence starts now. And so from that point on, you cannot speak. And I remember just for a second, looking around, there's some very, very concerned people because they had so much questions that they still needed to have answered. Like, I didn't come and I didn't bring this, where do I get that? And it was like, you're on your own now. You got to figure all of this stuff out without talking. So the schedule for the retreat was, and it was, I think, a 4-day, 3-night retreat. The schedule was before sunup, everybody would get together in Nana's cabin, and there would be a group meditation. Then she would give the morning lecture. Then by now the sun was out, and we'd go outside and we do some breathing exercises and Tai Chi movement. After that, you're on your own till sundown. And the only instruction Nana gave people was to go into nature, be very silent, and listen and observe. That's all she told people to do. She would spend her day in her cabin writing and reading. At sundown, or at just before sundown, the group would again meet and we'd have another group meditation. Nana would give the evening lecture. Then you're on your own again till the next day. A little about Nana's lectures. She had a stroke previous to this retreat, a couple of years before this retreat. So she was moving a lot slower, and she also was speaking a lot slower by this time. But her message was still very, very clear. Her lectures are very simple. She would tell us about the power of the spoken word, and she would ask us to examine deeply the meaning of the words that we use. She would have us examine the intention behind the words that we were using, and to consider the responsibility that we have when we choose to speak these words. A word like forgive, for instance. We think of forgive, or some of us think of forgive as, I'll forgive you this time, but the next time, or I'm a very forgiving person, but I have my limits. Nana would say, if you say you forgive, forgive. No strings, no limits to your forgiving. If you actually mean you forgive, understand what you mean when you say the word, and then carry through, be responsible for it. Forgive unconditionally, in other words. So what I was getting from her message was that if you cannot stand behind the words that you're going to use, it's better that you just be silent. And so we would be left to ponder her words, examine our intentions, and the true feelings behind the words that we used as she went through her lectures. We were on a mountain hike, about 5 of us, and we're going uphill. We didn't have any line of sight because it was a winding trail, a lot of foliage around us, and of course the mountainsides. But in about an hour, we got to the plateau, and we came across this beautiful, beautiful view. Mountains on both sides. We're looking down into this very deep valley, looking at mountains ahead of us. And we're about 3,000 feet up. That's how high we are. And we're watching flocks of birds flying below us, very, very low below us. And it was a sight to see. The sun was low. There were clouds around the sun, starting to change color. And you could see people looking at each other and just bursting, wanting to say, wow, look how beautiful this is. Or look at the clouds and the changing of the colors. And then everybody had to remember that we cannot speak right now. So what did happen was the ki changed. All of that energy that was going like this started to really calm down. Everybody started to look collectively at this view. And you could start to feel that people were communing with each other without speaking. you knew that person was feeling how beautiful it was. And it was quite an experience to do that. A group of people not being able to speak, but you could still communicate with each other. Another incident that I'd like to share with you. I was sitting at the table going over some things that needed to be done with both Nana and Mike. Like we're just closing up the retreat, so we needed to figure out the logistics for when all the keys needed to be in, when the luggage needed to be out, things like that. So Mike leaves the table, and he doesn't come back for a while. So I'm still going over this with Nana, and I noticed that she's sitting across me. I noticed that she leans over, then she comes back to center, and she's kind of chuckling and smiling. And she does this about 2 or 3 times. She's nodding her head, smiling to herself. So I turned to look, and there's a big picture window behind me. I turned to look outside, and what I'm viewing is the wind blowing all the trees and bushes, and it's moving like that. And I keep looking to figure out what she's seeing. So when I turn back, Nana leans in a little bit, and she goes, spirits. So at that time, I kind of moved my chair over so that I'm not in her view plane anymore. And I just sat there watching her going through this silent communion with whatever spirits were out there. It was really something to see. Another incident was at the last day, we have a group dinner. This is the last night. Next day, everybody leaves. And everybody meets at the lodge. So I'd like you to imagine being the server of a table of 15 people, taking their dinner orders, and nobody can speak. It was hilarious. It was like a giant Pictionary game. People would be pointing, and they don't want something, like, not that. And you cannot say things like that. Can I have my salad dressing on the side? Or you cannot see anything. So it was very, 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 very funny to do that. So that was one of the funny moments in the workshop or retreat. The last one I'd like to share with you is that after everybody was in the vans, luggage is all packed, the last thing we do is we went down to the Kalalau lookout. And if any of you have been there to see that, it's a beautiful panoramic view, mountains on both sides, lush greenery, and a valley down to the ocean. Beautiful, beautiful view. We get there, everybody gets out of the vans, and everything is locked in. The sky is gray, it's dark, and there's a heavy mist. And the only thing we can see is the railing of the lookout. We cannot see anything past that. In a few minutes, Nana arrives. So everybody turns to see her. She again, like she began the retreat, bows her head with her hands in front of her and is very silent for a while. Then she says, as she smiles and looks up, the silence is now broken. And just at that time, we turned to look, and there was not a cloud in the sky. All the mist had disappeared, and here lay that beautiful panoramic view at the Kalalau lookout. And this was over a matter of maybe 2 minutes that this transformation in nature happened. So those are the things that I would like to share with you about my experiences with Nana Veary.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, what a amazing experience that you had and were able to so beautifully share with us. Can I start by asking you a question, Jerry?
Yes.
Knowing everyone that this is a conversation circle, so we are kind of going to be speaking across a round table. It's not just everybody's question and answering with Jerry. So when I ask him this question, then it really applies to all of you. And so I'd love to, of course, hear from all of you and expect you to have your own questions and comments to make as well. So I'm going to ask Jerry, and then I wonder amongst all of you, what would you say, Jerry, was perhaps your biggest takeaway from your experience with Nana Veary? And how did it affect the rest of your life?
I believe the takeaway for me was the validation of the power of silence. Because at the dojo, we followed this silent rule also in meditating. And she deepened that feeling of in a retreat, not being able to speak at all. But when she lectured, it was like she was talking to me directly about the things that were going on in me. And so it showed me the power of silence and to be very careful with my words. That would be my takeaway.
Thank you. Anybody else? What was the takeaway that you've gotten just listening to? Jerry, tell us stories about Nana Veary. And how do they maybe relate to other experiences you've had, since each of you is a gem of wisdom and contains many gems of wisdom? Cliff?
Well, the one little story, Jerry, you said about using the word forgiveness and how not using it with like a limited sense of forgiveness, but if you're going to be forgiving, you're going to do it in a wholehearted way. I was wondering if like there's two kinds of language. There's like language that which has a lot of conditions, qualifiers, things connected to our words, either unsaid or said. And then there's more of an unconditional way of approaching other human beings and the world we live in through our language, maybe even more universal way of communicating. And I was wondering if through your being with them, those two teachers and your own study, if through silence and serenity, we can have a different sense of how to use language.
Now you're speaking to me, Cliff? Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Just the idea of being with a group at the top of that mountain and knowing and feeling what they were feeling, but nobody was saying anything. But we knew. We were all in sync at the same vibrational level, experiencing something, but not having to talk about it, not letting any of it out, just ingesting it, but yet sharing it with people around us through a different way of emoting or like speaking.
Mary.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you, Jerry, for such a wonderful topic and expanding upon it. And the two places that you commented on, Kalihi Valley and Koke'e, have very special significance in my life too. As a practicing Catholic, just below that dojo is the St. Anthony's Retreat Center, which was the original Catholic orphanage for children who lost their parents during the measles epidemic in the early years when the sailors and the Westerners came, and the Hawaiians had no defenses against those diseases. And so I go there. I've been going up there for 20 years plus, and it's such a healing place. And then at Kokee, more than 20 years with our hula halau, and all the images that you presented are so sharp in my mind. And I know that Renee has been up there and Truk has been there, and you don't have to talk, because sometimes what surrounds you says everything. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Kevin.
But I really enjoyed listening, and it just brought me back to my first experience after the World Trade Center incident, 9/11, and just seeing that huge vacant space of what used to be these massive symbols of, New York. I went to New York City every summer growing up, doing dance conventions, things like that. And to go back and just see that void after such a horrible thing was very sombering. And then also to see that transition of the memorial that they built was also awe-inspiring. And just to think, in the middle of that hustle and bustle of such a big city and in the heart of Manhattan, there was true silence. And people really, go there to reflect, to remember, but it also kind of gave you a little escape away from that busy city life. And for just that moment, you felt that you were in a serene place of nature or something like that. So I do think that silence allows time to reflect, to think, especially in a difficult situation, or if you're up against something that you're having a very hard time grasping or deciding. It really just can help you find that calm and allow enough time for you to react in a way that's, aligned with your values. Whereas if you made such a snap decision or a quick reaction, many times that's not in silence, it's in anger or in some other emotion. And I do think that silence is so powerful at times. And I think there was a quote once that said, it's not when I'm speaking that you have to be worried about, it's when I'm silent. And that's so telling, because a lot of people are always very vocal when they're upset, but it's those who really take a moment and, not give the cold shoulder, but just give that pause. That's when people start to sometimes get nervous and say, oh, did I ruffle feathers, or did I, and I think it allows for a lot of reflection. So I loved the story, Jerry, and I really appreciate you presenting on it.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. Donna, your hand is up. Do you want to still make a comment or question?
Well, I wanted to thank the speaker.
His name is Jerry Punzal.
Jerry, thank you so much. I was thinking about Cliff's comment about the language being unconditional, and some language being unconditional. And I was thinking about whether that's in the words. Where does that unconditionality exist? And the whole time you were speaking, I'm not sure that I've ever heard a clearer or had a clearer feeling for a very sincere reverence and devotion to the idea of a teacher. And that was somehow a little bit beyond the words themselves. A kind of clarity, and I can't say much more about it, but I really appreciated it.
Thank you, Donna. Diana.
Thank you so much, Jerry. You really embodied silence and serenity. As she was saying, it was like when you shared, it came across and I could feel it through my whole body. It was like being taken there. And being on many long retreats that were silent, for me, I feel deeper connection with people in the silence, because you're almost talking soul to soul, or there's some connection of oneness that the words tend to break. And but your words actually shared that. And I think that sometimes we are too, in our society, especially now, people are using too many words. If they would sit in silence and just share that depth of understanding and love and just be quiet for a while, we'd have more common ground and see that. And the other thing that struck me that you were talking about was listening. And I think that the gift of listening to nature, of listening to each other, and really with an open heart and of being aware of what we say, but more an open-hearted listening. We can only do that if we allow ourselves to be silent and come from that place. So thank you so much. That was just, it did touch me very deeply, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You know, there's something that Roger passed on one time. I think it was at a hula class here at Still and Moving Center. And I've brought it up before, and I would like to bring it up again, that when we have eyes wide open, it's not possible for us to really feel these negative emotions of anger or all kinds of negative emotions, when we just can be wide-eyed. And I'm wondering if there's something analogous to that in regard to the ears. That as you were speaking, Diana, I was imagining us in nature with that sense of awe, with these wide, soft eyes, and also with the ears wide open and almost like the heart wide open. When everything is softly opened wide, of course we can have a better sense of connection. We can't hold those grudges or those distrusts of one another when we have that soft openness. And I think it goes beyond the eyes to other aspects of ourselves, perhaps. I'm so happy that True Ku is one of the people with whom I was able to study Tai Chi with Jerry at Still Moving Center in the early days, was able to join us from Vietnam. I don't know if your husband Cortland is there also, but it's certainly wonderful to have you, True.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity for me to see Jerry after a long time, and also to talk with all of you. I just want to say that I think when we talk about silence, it's not like total silence. It's not like 100% silent, because I think there's always a message that goes with silence. Like when Jerry talks about how everyone was quiet and admiring the beauty of the nature, there was actually a communication among themselves about that. So, for example, there's sometimes we have like the silent treatment. So there's always either positive or negative message that goes with silence. So that's just my point. Because I've been writing like a children's book about this kid who cannot talk much. So, but there's a lot of things going on inside a kid, and also there's a communication between the hearts of different people that interact with the kid. And coincidentally, yeah, that story also centers at the, the lack of sound and spoken words doesn't mean there's no message or there's no communication. And I let me see if I can let my baby to say hi with tomorrow.
As Truk was talking about different messages that come through silence, I was remembering a saying that Sometimes silence is golden and sometimes it's just plain yellow. Oh, there's Miley and Cortland. Aloha, Miley. It's so nice to have you join us, and Cortland too.
Hello. Yeah, just want to let Miley say hi to everyone, especially Uncle Jerry and Auntie Mary.
Can you say aloha?
Yeah, aloha.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to see your little family. David.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, everyone, for your contributions. I had a profound encounter once back in the days of the Warner Earhart-esque trainings. Well, he had several teachers, but Zen was one of the places that he got his resources. But in the retreat, and there were maybe 250 people in the room, one of the most profound experiences of the 2 weekends was the 1 hour seated silent meditation. And the instruction was fairly simple. Well, you're sitting in conference room chairs, so it's not terribly comfortable to begin with. And you're sitting in silence with people inches away from you and in a large room, and everyone's silent. And the instructions were simply to pay attention to what comes up. Just follow the thoughts and see what's present. And I started to imagine these thoughts because I was at first like, why am I thinking about that? Of all things I could think about, how did that show up? And then this, and are these things related? Why are they coming together at this time? And more of these little elements started to come in, and I started visualizing them kind of like a swirl over my head. And they were all up there, and I was like, this. And all of a sudden, they landed for me like a jigsaw puzzle falling into place. And I had a very profound revelation about my upbringing and the life that I had led thus far there in my 30s, half a lifetime ago. And it was purely from the silence, but I think it was also the size of the group and the proximity of people. It was such a potent silence. It was truly profound. Another profound, this is a little more physical. I took Jerry's classes way back a few times there in the early days. And I remember Jerry inviting me to try to push him over. And it was like pushing up against like a brick wall. It was almost like I would fall over the harder I tried to push against him. And so, Jerry, I was curious about, because I get a sense that groundedness that you have and that you were demonstrating very, very viscerally in that practice, the relationship between the power of silence and the power of that groundedness that I felt in working with you. And do you connect those two at all?
Yes, I would say that as we learn in Tai Chi, we need to ting. The word is ting, or to listen. And to listen at a very high level, you need to be very silent. You need to calm your thoughts and be very, very silent to listen. And it's in that silent place that you can hear. You can hear the other person's energy. You can hear the direction, speed, and intensity that energy is coming to you. And it starts with being able to be very, very silent so that you can think, so you can hear. Yeah, it's a definite connection to that.
Thank you, Jerry.
Yes, Roger.
You know, to me, it ties in the whole idea of us being connected to a universal energy. And what we are essentially is vibrations. And so when we calm those vibrations and we sit in silence, we let the light in, we let the energy of the universe, the intuition, like a computer, come to us. And I also think when we sit in nature, there's the vibration from the nature, from the trees and the everything. And so what Nana was saying in my mind is you calm yourself and you sit peacefully, and all the disturbing vibrations within you calm down, and you're able to get in touch with the center part of who we are. And when you go out in nature, the nature does it for you. Or collaborates with you in helping you calm down that way. And so sitting under a tree, I mean, we don't have to mention the Buddha, but sitting under a tree helps you really get in touch with the tree. Think about a tree that just stands there for centuries and lives and breathes. And I know my friend Elizabeth Satoris tells me that trees communicate in 10 different ways. But I just thought that it's so beautiful. And I never did know Nana Veary. I did read her book. I was trying to find it today, Renee, when you mentioned this, that a change we must. And but it's just so beautifully insightful in the Hawaiian tradition. And I like the way, Jerry, you put together the silence and the going out in nature. You know, something that's become very popular now is tree bathing. It's a Japanese concept. It's not very, difficult to understand, but it's become very popular. And perhaps it emphasizes how much we've lost the sense of just doing it on our own, that we got to, hire people to take us out to get that. But anyway, that's what really resonated with me. The idea that you can do it on your own by sitting silently, but if you go out in nature, it's basically the same thing. It's bringing your energy in tune with God, with the universal energy of that we're all connected to. So thank you very much.
I can share an experience of taking a group of children, 9 to 14 years old, approximately in age, backpacking into the Sierra, a group called Pathfinders, and Cliff and I were amongst the adults who were the path leaders. And we were fortunate to have people very experienced in the backcountry like Cliff when we would go on these trips. And when we started out, the kids were so restless and discontent, and they really missed their devices, even though this was back in the 80s, maybe late, probably 80s. But they still had, I don't know, Walkman and radios and so on that they couldn't listen to, being back there in the backwoods. Plus, I don't think we probably allowed them. And then every trip, by the time we got to the third day, just the whole kind of charged, jangly energy of those youngsters had settled down, and there was a softness, definitely an openness. When we would sit around the campfire at night, there was a different quality to that experience. And I remember a week that ended at sunrise, and we were just sitting there silently, and it was a little bit like that experience of being there on the lookout of the Ko'olau Valley, and everything socked in. You can't see anything for the mist. And Nana Veary comes and breaks the silence with this beautiful smile first, and then everything clears. Well, at the end of this dawn meeting that we were having, the sun crests over the mountaintop, and we look to see this beautiful stag with full rack, I guess you call it, his antlers. And we all just it was just so magnificent. And we just felt such a sense of awe and how privileged we were to behold this site. And it's something that's, traveled with me as an image decades since then. It was a really high point of experience in silence and in nature and shared.
Well, on behalf of all of us, Jerry, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, actually, just listening to you tell your stories of these two great teachers that you had the privilege of being close to and learning from. And I think totally embodying the very teaching that you were talking about or sharing stories about of silence and serenity. It was, I think, as Donna said, just the way you expressed yourself, and Diana too, that it just oozed out of you, this calmness, this groundedness, this way of being that we often forget about in our more fragmented and hectic, chaotic lives that we live in the modern world. And I think it's just a wonderful way to begin the year, is to almost, I felt almost like listening to you talk. It was like listening to beautiful music in a way that just calms your nerves and kind of readies you for the challenges that we all have in our own daily lives and so forth. And so it really felt like a way of drawing back or drawing in, or just getting to that calm center that is within all of us, is within nature, of course, and beginning to become citizens of, citizens of
the future.
Citizens of the future who are grounded in silence and serenity. So thank you, Jerry. It's so good to see you again. And thank for everybody else for all their contributions as well.